What if the most terrifying prison in history had no criminals, no murderers, and no psychopaths? Just ordinary college students, young men with normal lives, normal dreams, and no history of violence. And within only 6 days, some of them became cruel, submissive, broken, and almost unrecognizable. This was not fiction. It was not a horror film. It was a real psychological experiment conducted at Stanford University in 1971. And even today, more than 50 years later, it still forces us to ask one deeply uncomfortable question. Under the right conditions, how different are ordinary people from monsters? In 2015, a film called The Stanford Prison Experiment brought this disturbing story back into public conversation. The movie shows a group of college students volunteering for a paid study, only to find themselves trapped inside a rapidly escalating prison simulation. It feels like a psychological horror film, but what makes it so powerful is that it is based on real events. Or at least, on a version of real events. Because the true story behind the experiment is even more fascinating than the movie, and much more complicated. The experiment began in 1971 at Stanford University under psychologist Philip Zimbardo. His goal was to explore how people behave when placed inside a system of power and submission. He wanted to understand whether cruelty comes from personality or whether the situation itself can transform ordinary people. To test that idea, he and his team created a mock prison in the basement of Stanford's psychology building. They placed a newspaper ad asking for male college students to participate in a study about prison life. 75 young men applied. After screening them for physical and mental health, the researchers selected 24 participants they considered psychologically stable and ordinary. Then they were randomly assigned roles. Some became guards, others became prisoners. There were no actors, no trained performers, just real students chosen by chance. The experiment began with surprising intensity. The students assigned as prisoners were arrested at their homes by real Palo Alto police officers. They were handcuffed, searched, taken to a police station, fingerprinted, and then brought to the mock prison at Stanford. Once inside, they were stripped, sprayed for delousing, given loose smocks, stocking caps, and chains around their ankles. Most importantly, their names were taken away. From that point on, they were identified only by numbers. The guards, meanwhile, were given uniforms, whistles, wooden batons, and mirrored sunglasses that hid their eyes. The sunglasses mattered. They made the guards feel less human and more anonymous, while making the prisoners feel watched, but unseen. The guards were told they could maintain order, but could not use physical violence. That was the basic structure. A fake prison, randomly assigned roles, and a system designed to feel real. At first, everything was awkward, but by the second day, the prisoners rebelled. They refused orders, shouted at the guards, and barricaded themselves inside their cells. That moment changed everything. The guards responded with forceful psychological punishment. They stripped the prisoners naked, removed beds, used fire extinguishers to break the rebellion, and placed some students in solitary confinement. From there, the situation began to spiral. Over the next few days, the guards became increasingly harsh. Some remained passive or only mildly strict, but a few became deeply controlling and humiliating. They woke prisoners in the middle of the night for repeated counts. They forced them to do push-ups, clean toilets, and obey pointless commands. They used sleep disruption, emotional pressure, and public humiliation to break resistance. What made the experiment so disturbing was not just the guards' behavior, but how quickly the prisoners began to change. Some became anxious, withdrawn, and emotionally overwhelmed. One prisoner, known as 8612, had an apparent breakdown and was released early. Others cried, stopped resisting, or became so absorbed in the prison environment that they seemed to forget they could simply leave. The line between role-play and reality became dangerously blurred. Philip Zimbardo later argued that this showed the terrifying power of systems. According to him, the experiment suggested that ordinary people can be shaped by roles, authority, and environment far more than they realize. In his interpretation, the guards were not monsters before entering the basement. The prison situation helped create that behavior. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. It lasted only 6 days. The person who helped stop it was Christina Maslach, a young psychologist who visited the mock prison and was horrified by what she saw. She watched prisoners being led around with bags over their heads and guards treating them with cold, degrading control. She confronted Zimbardo and told him the situation had gone too far. That confrontation forced him to see that he was no longer acting like a neutral researcher. He had become part of the prison system himself. The experiment was terminated on August 20th, 1971. Later, Zimbardo admitted that he had lost objectivity. That admission became one of the most important parts of the experiment's legacy. The study was not just about what happened to the students. It was also about what happened to the people observing them. For decades, the Stanford Prison Experiment became one of the most famous studies in psychology. It was used to support a powerful idea: that systems, authority, and social roles can dramatically shape human behavior. In simple terms, people do not always act according to their personal values. Sometimes, they act according to the role they are given. Several psychological concepts were connected to the experiment. One is de-individuation, where people lose their sense of personal identity inside uniforms, numbers, or groups. Another is obedience to authority, similar to the famous Milgram experiments, where ordinary people followed harmful instructions because an authority figure told them to continue. Another is role internalization, where people begin performing a role and then slowly become absorbed by it. These ideas mattered because they helped explain real-world cruelty, not just in prisons, but in war, police abuse, institutional violence, and everyday situations where power exists without accountability. The experiment seemed to suggest that evil is not always a personality trait. Sometimes it is a process. But the story does not end there. In recent years, the Stanford Prison Experiment has faced major criticism, and some of it is serious enough to change how we understand the study. First, evidence suggests the guards were not as spontaneous as Zimbardo originally claimed. Archival recordings and later research, especially by Thibault Letexier, indicate that guards received guidance to create feelings of frustration, powerlessness, and fear among the prisoners. That means the experiment may not have been a pure observation of natural behavior. The conditions may have pushed participants toward the outcome the researchers expected. Second, one of the most famous prisoners, Douglas Corpy, later said that his breakdown was at least partly exaggerated so he could get out of the experiment. That does not mean the experience was harmless, but it does mean one of the most iconic moments may not have happened exactly as the public was told. Third, not all guards became sadistic. Some were strict, some were passive, and only a few were especially cruel. That weakens the simple idea that power automatically turns everyone into a monster. Individual differences still mattered. Fourth, the sample itself was limited. These were young male college students in America in 1971, and later research suggested that people who volunteered for a prison study may already have had higher tendencies toward dominance or aggression than average. That makes it difficult to generalize the findings to all human beings. Finally, modern psychologists point out that Zimbardo's dual role as both researcher and prison superintendent created a serious conflict of interest. He was not just studying the system, he was helping run it. That makes the study ethically and scientifically flawed by modern standards. So was the experiment fake? Not exactly. Was it perfect science? Definitely not. The most balanced conclusion is that the study was deeply flawed, but it still raised important questions about power, conformity, and the danger of institutions. That brings us back to the movie. The Stanford Prison Experiment works very well as cinema because it captures the emotional atmosphere of the basement. The claustrophobia, the slow loss of control, the psychological dread, and the way ordinary people can become trapped in a role. All of that feels disturbingly real. Billy Crudup's portrayal of Philip Zimbardo is especially effective because he does not play him as an obvious villain. He plays him as a man who becomes fascinated by his own experiment and slowly loses the distance a scientist is supposed to maintain. Michael Angarano's performance as the most aggressive guard is also memorable because it shows how cruelty can feel like performance before it starts feeling natural. But the film simplifies the history. It presents the guards' cruelty as mostly spontaneous, downplays later criticism about coaching, and treats the breakdown of prisoner 8612 as fully genuine without acknowledging later doubts. In that sense, the movie captures the emotional truth of the experiment better than its full factual complexity. So how much of the movie is real? Some of it is strongly grounded in documented events. Some of it is shaped for drama. Like many true story films, it is most accurate in feeling, but less complete in evidence. And that is why the Stanford Prison Experiment still matters. Not because it gave us perfect answers. It didn't. Not because it proved that all people are secretly evil. It didn't. It matters because it exposed something deeply unsettling about human behavior. Under certain conditions, ordinary people can become capable of cruelty, obedience, silence, and moral surrender far faster than we want to believe. But it also revealed something else. Not everyone gave in. Not everyone became abusive. And one person, Christina Maslach, looked at the system and said, "No, that matters too." So maybe the real lesson is not that monsters are born, or even simply created by situations. Maybe the real lesson is that every system tests the people inside it, and every person at some point has to decide whether they will follow the role or resist it. The basement at Stanford is gone. The cells are gone. The uniforms are gone. But the question remains. If you were placed in that situation, surrounded by authority, pressure, and permission, who would you become?